welcome back to another episode of the ARC Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Zachary. If you're new tuning in, thank you for joining. This is the Athletes Resilience Center podcast, where we talk all things mental performance in sports. Well, in this episode, we have on special guest Justin Hirschberg. Justin is a mental performance coach who works with baseball players on improving the mental part of their game. We go into Justin's journey through baseball, on how he started out as a youth athlete, going to Jaeger sports camps and learning the mental side of pitching as a younger athlete, and this progressed into leading into some success in high school, where then he got an opportunity to play in college at Occidental College, and then later went to grad school at Barry University, where he was able to work with the baseball team specifically and help work with a lot of their athletes in a team setting and also in a one-on-one setting. This episode is filled with a bunch of mental performance tips that Justin goes through, whether it's focusing on visualization or journaling or breathwork. He incorporates a lot of what he teaches into this episode and goes over why he thinks each of those different mental performance practices are important and vital to athletes. This was a great episode, and I hope you guys enjoy. Justin, thank you so much for coming on, brother. I'm very excited to have you on and discuss your journey and your life in mental performance in sports. So how are we doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm
Of
excited.
course. Yeah, no, I'm excited too. I'm really pumped to kind of hear your journey. I think you've had some unique perspectives with playing baseball and now kind of transitioning into working with not just baseball players, but athletes in general, overall in mental performance. So I'm really excited to kind of get to pick your brain on this. But just like we start every episode, I'm going to kick it back to you and let you kind of introduce yourself and share with us your journey on how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my story kind of starts back when I was, let's say, 12 years old.
Hmm.
I learned who Jaeger Sports was. I don't know if you've seen the J bands that
Yes,
everybody uses, but
of course. Yep.
uh, growing up in LA, I coincidentally found out that they run baseball camps every summer. And so, as a young kid, I went, and it was nothing like the baseball camps I ever did or participated in. They preached mental performance, they preached meditation and visualization and deep tissue stretching. It was actually like something I had never seen before, and also something that no one else my age was doing. And so from an early age, I learned about long toss and just like overall arm and body health. And from that point on, it became a whole part of my identity as a pitcher, where I never picked up a baseball without doing my bands or long tossing. I learned how to like use my breath and visualize from a very early age, which I owe a lot to those guys. But it taught me a lot about the mental side of baseball. And so from there, had a pretty good high school career. I was not a hard thrower. I was, mid to high 70s as a lefty, but I think my mentality is what allowed me to succeed and, get a spot in college. And so went to Occidental College, Division III in California. Had a decent career, had some ups and downs, some bullpen starts, some I had some spot starts. I was, average, but I had my days, and um, it was kind of a wake up call because I learned how you can't just rely on skill anymore. You actually have to be like mentally involved and mentally in charge of your thoughts and everything going on to succeed in college, no matter the level. Senior year after COVID, I decided to come back for one more year, and I thought it was going to be, my best year. I was 22. I was feeling really good, and just it wasn't the year that I thought it would be. And I really think a lot of it has to do with the mental side. And I just was not, mentally on top of what I could have been. And I was not doing as much as I could have done to prepare. And as much as that sucks to admit, I really do think that opened up my eyes to how important the mental side of baseball really is. And I learned a lot from that failure. And from there, it really grew my passion for the mental side of sports, baseball specifically. So I went to Miami, got my master's at Barry University, where I learned just how I can apply, sports psychology to sports. I recently graduated in May, and now I started Hirschberg Performance Lab, where I can work with athletes to teach them the mental skills and allow them to kind of fully understand just how important the mental side of sports really is.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. And we've had a couple people who have come on that have worked in mental or now work in mental performance in sports. And like you said, I feel like everyone kind of has their own battle and journey with the mental side of sports, right? Like you said, kind of going into your senior year, fighting a lot of that and trying to kind of understand and figure out what the importance of that was. And then ultimately, I feel the same way. I'm also a fellow Division III pitcher, so I feel you on that. But I completely agree with like the understanding the mental side of sports almost too late in a sense, right? It's like really valuing it until after you're done. I'm right there with you. I completely agree, but I love hearing that, and that kind of motivated you to kind of get in the space. But I'd love to start back in the beginning because I think your unique experience with like the Jaeger sports camps, like you just discussed, because I think anyone in the baseball sphere, especially pitchers, know J bands are a huge deal. I mean, when I was in high school, I was watching the YouTube videos of Alan Jaeger with like Trevor Bauer and all those guys long tossing. Like I was watching all those videos. I was a huge long toss guy in high school and early college. Like really bought into that, and I really think it helped me a ton. And kind of hearing them preach the mental side, I love to hear your perspective on that going into those camps because me watching the videos from afar on YouTube, like obviously they would talk about mental performance and you can only grasp so much of that through like a YouTube video. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that. Like, what was that like for you as a young athlete? And was it like overwhelming to you? Did the things that they were saying make sense? Or how did that all come together when you were kind of so young? Like you said, you were 12.
Yeah, I actually think being that young was a good thing because I didn't know anything different.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
so new to like being cognitive of what I was doing and like growing in my baseball career where
Right.
what I learned like at that age is like, okay, this is what I should be doing.
Right.
And actually that Trevor Bauer long toss video is the exact reason I found out who they were is because I
Really?
saw the video on YouTube,
Yeah.
saw the banner at the end, and it just happened to be that they were in my area. But um, getting to know those guys, his whole approach is just being present with what you're doing and just no matter what, like be where your feet are, learn to just surrender to the present moment and don't let a single thing, whether it's in the past or the future, like don't let that affect what you're doing at that moment. And the avenues to get there are your breath, like the thoughts we have, just like the cues that we use to get to that moment. But especially in pitching, like when it's time to make a pitch, you need to be so locked into that present moment that nothing else matters. And I learned how important that was and just how necessary it is to actually succeed in sports because you can get away with, throwing hard and getting swings and misses, but when you don't have the best stuff and you need to live around the zone and throw all your pitches for strikes, it's like, okay, let me just be as good as I can be by just being so committed to the right now.
Yeah, no, and I think that long toss program, even for me, just anecdotally as a high schooler, like really helped teach me each throw was kind of independent from one another because obviously as you're getting further and further out in that program, like Trevor Bauer in that video is throwing baseballs like 400 feet. It's something crazy. Like I remember watching that and being like, whoa, that's what I want to do. But when you're going through that program, just watching it and kind of trying to implement it on my own. I was on the complete opposite coast in New Jersey, but like watching that and implementing that, I do remember each individual throw, making sure you're giving maximum levels of effort into each thing that you're doing. And I really think that resonated with me as like a young athlete. And it's really cool to hear that you were kind of a part of those camps in that program because I mean that's something that like is near and dear to my heart and I guess the development of how I was as a pitcher going into high school and college. So that's awesome to hear. But when you were in, I guess, at 12 years old and then in high school as you're kind of going throughout your high school baseball career, did you have aspirations of playing professional baseball or was it always, I'm going to try to play in college and then from there see what happens? Or was there like that ideology in your head of trying to play professional baseball?
For me, the dream was always get to college and
Yeah.
pitch in college. I never
Okay.
really, obviously, as a young kid, is like, I want to pitch for the Red Sox one day.
Yeah, of
But,
course.
I think probably early on in high school, I realized, the cards were probably not in my, or on, I don't know the phrase, but early on in
Yeah,
high
yeah.
school, I learned that it wasn't probably cut out for me. So I think I knew I was good enough to pitch in college. And that was my goal. And so getting the opportunity to was, a lifelong dream for me.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's awesome. Now, when you got to college and you stepped foot, right, like you said, you had some success in high school, and then going into college, like you said, it was kind of a little bit of a wake up call. And I'm sure, for everyone, I was the same way. That first year you get on campus, you kind of see there's another level to these things, right? And even from the outsider looking in, obviously you and I played Division III baseball, and we both know how competitive and how talented a lot of those athletes are. But from the outside looking in, as a young athlete, you probably can go into the Division III school and think, oh, I can, pop in and be a starter right away because it's Division III. But the second you get on campus, you realize, wow, a lot of these guys are way more mature than me, way more developed than me. What was kind of that, I guess, wake up call for you when you got on campus? And how did you see some of the upperclassmen, maybe some of the older pitchers, kind of handle their business and take care of themselves mentally?
Yeah, the number one thing was the work ethic. And you show up, and on an off day, the seniors are just, doing the stuff that they need to do to get them ready to go. And it's the difference between saying to the coach, like, what do I need to do on my off day versus I know what I need to do. I just have to find a way to get it done. And, I was a starter my whole life. I got to college. I had the goal of starting, once a weekend. And when I got to the point of my freshman year where, I'd start every now and then, but I was mostly out of the bullpen, I kind of started to take it a little personally. And I was like,
Yeah,
oh, they have it out for me. I'm clearly good enough. When
right,
in reality, no matter what, I 100% could have just looked in the mirror and said, I'm probably not good enough right now. I need to find a way to get better. And so that was a good wake up call of like, okay, what can I be doing differently than what I'm doing now? Because as we know, the definition of insanity is you just do the same thing over and over again and you're hoping
right,
that the results change when in reality, you probably need a different system to get to where you want to go.
right. No, I completely get that. And, I kind of feel the same way where I know in my freshman year getting on campus, I was the same way. I've been a starter in high school and had some success. And then I got on campus and I got my opportunity to start. And then my first start did not go as planned. I think I went like 2 innings, probably walked 4 guys and got pulled. Like, not the start I wanted, of course. And from there on out, I didn't get as many opportunities. And again, I probably wasn't ready for the opportunities, but you have that narrative in your head of like, oh, I should be getting these opportunities potentially. But again, like you said, it's going back to correcting the systems that you put in place and maybe implementing some different things in order to get to where you want to go. So, what system changes for you did you make when you were in college that kind of helped you, I guess, jump from that mindset of like, well, they have it out for me, they have it out for me, to like, I'm just gonna, put the work boots on and get to work and try to, earn the spot that I think I deserve.
Yeah. And I think it's really just taking a step back and kind of putting your ego aside and just
Yeah.
saying, like, okay, my feelings are hurt or I don't feel how I should be, but like objectively, am I where I want to be? No. Okay, what can I do to get better? And it's like whether you want to show up for those days or not, like the good athletes, the ones who you want to be, the ones you emulate, are the ones who show up on those days and get better. And I can say that now when I probably back then was not doing that.
Right. Right.
Because obviously, who knows what would have been different. But in hindsight, that's exactly what it should have been. And that's what it was on some days. But then there were also other days where I can admit, I was probably lazy. I did the bare minimum. I showed up to my lift and I left right away instead of doing extra or stretching when I needed to. Um, the little stuff that doesn't show up on the stat sheets that clearly could have made me a better pitcher.
Yeah. No, I completely get that. And I think a piece to that too is the mental performance aspect of it, right? You said kind of your senior year, things didn't kind of fall your way, right? And that kind of led you to thinking back, like, what could I have put in place, both physically and mentally, that maybe successes could have been different, could have looked a little bit different. So, at what point for you did you kind of realize or look back and say, this is something that I want to get into, as in the mental performance space of sports, and getting your master's after that? Like, at what point were you like, this is something I want to chase after? And like, versus, was that always the plan, or was there something in college that kind of, I don't know, sparked that for you that made you want to do that?
Yeah, I've always known I loved the mental side of baseball.
Mm-hmm.
But my entire college career, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. I knew it had to do with sports, and on the medicine side, I kind of thought I was going to go to PA school or PT school. But I just didn't have a love for the medicine side of athletics than I do for the psychological side. Um, I want to be, on the sidelines, in the dugout with the athletes, helping them like on the front lines be their best self. And so my senior year, when I was affected by the negative sides of it, I was like, okay, like this is super important. It's important to me. It's important to other athletes. Like I want to make it my mission to help other people learn the mistakes that I didn't know when I should have. But also, if you're not struggling, like still learn to be your best self before it's too late.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's incredible. And I love talking to guys who are professionals in this space, because I think it is so valuable and almost still an underlooked, role in what athletes need, and what they need to incorporate into, even their daily routine. So as you kind of went through your master's program, you said you worked with like the Barry University baseball team. So while you were at Barry working with some of these guys, can you kind of go through with us, like, what did your routine look like with these guys? Like, what was your, I guess, specific role? How did that look? Because I just would love to know, from like the outsider looking in, like, how did that work? Were you working with them in game? Were you working with them only like in an office outside of the game? Like, how did that work? Were you like a part of the team? How did that work?
Yeah, so we were very lucky to have a good coaching staff who was very open to implementing and allowing us to have our space, with the team.
Yeah.
And so what our goal was how can we teach the mental skills without it, taking up too much time for these athletes? Because as you know, Division two, any division athlete, like their schedules are super busy. And if you're an athlete and you say like, okay, I have practice and lift and I have to do my homework, oh, and I have another hour for the sports psych department, like you might not show up with the right head or you might
Right.
not even show up at all. And so
Right.
my goal was how can we implement mental performance into their daily lives where they learn to apply it, but also don't have to go out of their way because I don't want it to be about us. And so we were lucky enough to have sessions with the team where it would be, 30, 45 minutes before practice. They're already at the field getting ready. My co consultant and I, we would come up with different things that the team needed to work on,
Yeah.
whether it was communication or effort or just the little things that, we saw during the week or the coach told us that the team needed to improve. And we'd find a way to, implement it in a fun way that they could like learn, but also enjoy it. And then most importantly, get them to apply it to their practices and to their games. But when we weren't doing sessions, we were in the dugout during practices, during games. We were able to do individual sessions with some of the athletes who wanted to work with us, which allowed me to learn both the individual side of mental performance and the team side as well, which
Yeah.
was really cool.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Now, when you were working in game and in practice, were there particular moments or opportunities where you were able to kind of communicate or talk with guys one on one, or was that more like outside of practice or games where you focused on that
No,
conversation?
absolutely. Um, at first, it was me sitting in the dugout, kind of waiting for guys to pass me. And as they're passing by, it's like, hey, what's up? How are you doing? How are you feeling?
Right.
But then I learned, especially as my past as an athlete, it's like sometimes those conversations just feel forced. And so what I
Yeah.
ended up doing was, they had batting practice for an hour plus every day. I'd get my glove, I'd go into the outfield, I'd talk to the pitchers who were shagging BP or the people like the hitters who were not in those groups, and you
Yeah.
just start a conversation. And you try and go into it with a plan of like, I want to talk about this, this, and this. But at the end of the
Right.
day, you just want to have a conversation with these guys, um, because the most vulnerable you can get is when they're not feeling it super structured. And so you start a conversation, you say, "Hi, how's your day going? How's school? Like everything going good at home?" You just find a way to like kind of peel back the onion, get in
Yeah.
some layers, and then just see if there's anything that they feel like they need to work on or improve or just want to, get better at. And that's, I think, the best way to actually like get in with the athlete is to just make it super personal, but also super casual at the same time.
Yeah, no, I love the way that you're kind of explaining that. And like you said, it's not about you; it's about the player and trying to make it as comfortable as you can to them, and giving them things to implement that will actually help, and that it's not like it doesn't feel like a job for them to communicate that with you. It feels like they're actually getting something out of it, which is awesome. Now, when you worked with them in a team setting versus an individual setting, did you find that players were more receptive in one kind of format over the other? Like, did you find that maybe an individual setting they could get a little bit more personal and talk about the things that they wanted to versus like a team setting? Or did you find that in a team setting, maybe, when you're talking about team chemistry and communication, people were a little bit more receptive to it in an open setting rather than like behind closed doors individually?
Yeah, I would say that depends on the person. And for the outgoing people who aren't afraid to talk in front of big groups, they like the team settings because they
Yeah,
can kind of open up and be themselves and like have the character behind who they are.
right.
Obviously, there will be the people who don't want to talk in front of 40 guys. And those are the guys you can talk to individually who might not necessarily like participate during the team stuff, but will like be happy to open up with you one on one. And so obviously I didn't get the chance to work one on one with everyone because not everybody wanted to, but it was cool seeing both sides of it because in a team setting, you can still get guys to talk who you don't work with personally, um, while also building up like the whole unit, which was the goal of those team sessions.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I like the you know you explaining kind of the introvert versus the extrovert style, right? And I feel like that kind of leads into when you get into the mental performance space, everyone is so different and individualistic, right? Like one thing might work for one guy versus something completely different for another. Now, when you're working with like Barry, let's say in that team setting, when you're talking about communication or talking about these overarching themes that you kind of want the team to embody, how does that work like at practice? Is it something that it's kind of in like a presentation format where you're like bringing them together and kind of working through things to create an identity for the team? Or is it something that like you're just communicating in like an open forum at practice? Like how does that side of it work, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it really depends. Um, First of all, on the topic, but also on the availability. And so, some things like the beginning of the year, we did a whole thing on identity and who we are as a team. And that was done in a classroom on a whiteboard with a presentation. It was more formally like structured.
Yeah.
And it still worked out well because we were able to lead at the front and have everybody like listen and participate. But then there were other times where the coach said, "Hey, we can give you 30 minutes before practice." That's when we're on the field doing more like fun interactive games or different ways to like teach the subject, without us needing to say, "Hey, I need to be in a classroom." Because if you say that to a coach, they're going to say, "Okay, sorry, like we can't do it today." And you're like, "Okay,
Right,
well,
right.
now I'm SOL and I don't get to work with them." So you have to find a way to adapt, without taking up too much time.
Yeah. No, definitely. Now, blending over into now your business, right? And like creating your structure where you're working with more individuals, right? You're getting more one on one. Are you working primarily remote with guys? Like, is it virtual one on one, or are there any in person clients?
Yeah, so right now it's mostly online, and I like that because I think that I'm capable of working with an athlete remotely well enough that I would do in person. Um, and this allows me to work with athletes across the country. They don't have to be, within a 30-mile radius of me. Um, so what I did is I built a structured program, a 12-week program where I teach them the mental skills they need. And the thing about it that I really like is that mental skills can apply to anybody. I just use
Yeah.
baseball as my way of teaching it.
Yeah.
And so what I do is I have the skills that I think they need that I teach them, but then I also allow them to apply it to their own lives and make it super personal to them. Because just like we talked about, each athlete's their own person. I don't want to interfere and say, this is how you need to be doing this. This is the right way to like think about mental performance. No, because that's not how it should be. They're the athletes. I'm just the one helping them. So it's how can I teach it to you, but make it super applicable to yourself and make you find a way to like actually enjoy it and process it yourself and then be able to apply it yourself as well.
Right. So when you're talking about kind of these overarching themes that you're kind of working with your athletes on, like these characteristics that I'm sure you want them to have in your time, both with your individual clients and then working at Barry and seeing athletes just overall as a whole. Because I also know you're very present on social media and posting a lot of like high level performers and kind of what they're doing to, I guess, raise their game from a mental perspective, which is awesome. I love watching, your clips that you post with kind of diving into some of that stuff. So I'd love to hear from your perspective, like, what are some of those characteristics that those high level performers have in sports? Like, I know you had the video the other day when you're talking about Yamamoto's performance, where he's writing everything in his little book that he has, and it's like his success obviously is not an accident. Like the things, the implementations that he puts into place are obviously working and are very successful, and he's very intentional about everything that he does. Now, I'd love to hear, are there different characteristics that you've kind of seen that a lot of performers have similarities with?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, one of the most important ones is preparation, where the best athletes don't show up to their game like hoping that they play well,
Right.
knowing that they weren't prepared, because that's just not going to happen, especially in the professional level. They know if I want to show up on game day ready to go, I have to prepare my butt off to make sure that I'm as prepared as I can be. And what that looks like is you practice, but not just practicing, it's diligent practice, deliberately like getting after it, pushing yourself to get better every single day, right? We like to say stack days. Well, these athletes
Yes.
are have been stacking days for years. It doesn't start, the day before or okay, now I'm going to start grinding. It's, no, I want to be ready on game day, so I'm going to start like when I first become a professional athlete or even earlier. Um, and also preparing comes with the visualization part of it where you don't necessarily show up on game day and it's all new to you because
Right.
if that is new to you, it just takes it takes longer in your brain to process it, which allows you to be a little bit slower and not
Hmm.
as like flow state as we want to be. And so I like visualization because it allows you to see yourself in that environment before you even step foot on it. Um, and so that was a big part of my pitching was like seeing myself on the mound with a batter in the box at my home stadium, throwing my pitches where I wanted them to go. Um, and I can't speak for these pro athletes. I can't tell you Yamamoto does it, but I can
Yeah.
tell you he
Right.
probably does something similar where he's not stepping on the field at in Toronto for the first time. He's
Right.
probably
Right.
seen himself throw those pitches hundreds or thousands of times already. Um, Another big part, like he did with the journaling, is just actually being able to like process your thoughts in the moment and be able to
Yeah.
make adjustments as you go. One of my high school coaches always told me like a good athlete makes the change inning to inning. A great athlete does it batter to batter. An excellent athlete does it pitch to pitch. And so I don't know what Yamamoto's writing, but he's probably in there talking about, what was working for him, what wasn't working for him, what can he do better. Just ways to make the adjustments before the game's over and before it's too late. And I think that's another huge part of elite athletes is being able to make those adjustments in game and like in
Yeah.
the moment.
Right. Yeah, I'd love for you to dive a little bit deeper into, because I think you brought up two really cool, I guess, tools that athletes can implement, right? Like you talked about the visualization aspect and you talked about the journaling aspect, and both of those kind of pairing together to create this preparation mentally for an athlete. Obviously, there is the physical side of making sure you're prepared, healthy, and ready to go. But can you dive a little bit into like the visualization first of like what would you kind of recommend visualization wise? Because I think a lot of people might say visualization as like a buzzword in like, oh, you need to visualize, 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 but actually implementing that and trying to like guide someone through what a visualization tactic might look like for them, what do you kind of recommend or what do you think would work for, athletes? Obviously everyone's different, but just kind of general rule of thumb when you're looking at visualization, what are maybe some bullet points that you want to hit as a pitcher?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think first and foremost, you want to implement all five senses, right? You want to make it as real as possible. Um, what I would recommend is getting somewhere quiet. You can lay down or sit in a chair, close your eyes, turn off the lights, like get rid of your distractions and just be with your own thoughts. And what I would do is to make it as realistic as possible, like figure out where you want it to be, figure out the smell, figure out like, are you touching the ball? Are you touching the rosin? Like, what do you see? What do you feel? What do you smell, right? You ever smell a
Right.
baseball? Like a new
Yeah.
baseball it's a cool smell.
Yeah.
And some players and coaches love to smell it, but like surround yourself in the environment to make it as realistic as possible. Because what it does is it tricks your brain into thinking that you're actually doing it. And we've all heard muscle memory, right? You have to do something thousands and thousands of times to make it like super reproducible and like convince your body that you've done it before. Well, are you going to tell a pitcher he has to throw thousands of baseballs before he throws in a game, right? That's just not
Right.
going to happen because you're
Right.
just going to get hurt. And so what you can do instead is you can throw your bullpens, but then you can also take this time to get your reps in without even picking up a ball. Um, so what I recommend is when you're in that quiet environment, when you're making it as game-like as possible, just seeing yourself succeed. And what I would do as a pitcher is go through your arsenal, right? Start with nobody on base and you're in your windup. See yourself throwing all your pitches to each spot, to lefties, to righties, right? Take the walk to the mound. Visualize every single part of it so it's not new to you. Then you can also start to figure out, like, how can I deal with adversity, right?
Right. I
Okay,
love
there's a
that.
runner on second, nobody out. Like, it's going to happen in a baseball game. So let me work on what I'm going to do to respond to that. So see yourself in the stretch, see yourself doing slide step, picking him off, or even like, it's kind of taboo to talk about, but I think it's super important to go through what's going to happen when failure occurs.
I love that.
So even seeing yourself, okay, 3-2, and the umpire squeezes me. I threw a great pitch, but it's a ball and the guy walks. How am
Right.
I going to respond in that moment? And
Right.
if you can practice that in your room before the game, then it's most likely going to occur that it's not going to be your worst response when it happens in a game.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. This is actually a topic that my co-host Matt and I have talked about in the past because I feel like when the conversation about visualization begins, everyone first goes to visualize success, success, success. And again, I do think that's extremely important. But again, you're a pitcher, I'm a pitcher. How many days have you actually gone out on the mound and you've actually had your A stuff or everything has gone the way that you thought it was going to go, right? Like that's not the way that it typically works out. And I think building that resilient visualization is something that's so beneficial because again, it puts those athletes in that spot of like, okay, maybe I did walk the leadoff hitter that inning, but like, how do I bounce back from there? Okay, like I have this technique where I can visualize that and understand, okay, I felt this before, now I can bounce back in game. And like you said, it helps you with that batter to batter and pitch to pitch adjustment where I think a lot of people aren't, I guess, talking about that side of visualization. So I love that you brought that up because that's, I think a really valuable tool.
Yeah, and I think a huge part of mental performance is how you respond to things that don't go your way. And it's so easy to say, my mind is great, my thoughts are clear when everything's going your way, when, you can't throw a ball and they're not hitting you and you just feel like you're in the zone. But that doesn't always happen, right? Probably, when you mentioned that, I probably had my A game, once a season where I was like, this is
Yeah,
perfect, everything's going
right,
great. So what's going
right.
to happen on those other days where, I can throw in the towel and just say to my coach, it's not my day, or you can find a way to bear down and get the job done. But to put myself in that situation and be as good as I can be when that happens, it starts with the preparation before the game of, okay, when things don't go my way, this is what I'm going to do to respond, or this is how I'm going to set myself up for success next time.
We want to take a quick second to let you know that today's podcast is brought to you by the Philly Pretzel Factory of Marlton, New Jersey. Whether it's picking up a snack between games or picking up a party tray for the big game, the Philly Pretzel Factory of Marlton has you covered. For all of your pretzel needs, make sure you stop by the Philly Pretzel Factory of Marlton, located on North Maple Ave. Let them know that the ARC podcast sent you. Now back to the episode. Yeah, and you made a great point earlier too, where you said like the first time you face that failure, you don't want it to be out on the mound actually in that game, right? Like you want to get those reps in. And like you said, if you are incorporating those five senses and you have that visualization technique that you're able to use, you are tricking your mind, like you said, into actually believing you have been there before, you've done that before. You're smelling the baseball the same way, you smell everything the same way, the sounds are the same, everything feels the same. And I love that kind of level of implementation, so that's awesome. And then the other piece that you mentioned too was the journaling aspect. And I know you've done a video on Instagram about journaling. I'd love to hear kind of your recommendation on how to start with journaling, because again, I think this is another topic that is brought up but maybe not so much dove into as deep as it probably should, with like how do you journal. Everyone probably journals differently, and that's okay, but I'd love to hear kind of your, I guess, framework for what a successful journaling session would look like and how that might help an athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's different for everybody. I can't tell you how to journal. But, I've battled my whole life the fact of like, okay, I don't need to write it down. I'll remember it. It happened in school all the time.
Yeah,
I almost never remembered it because
right.
we can only have so many like thoughts and memories in our mind. And if we don't get it out there, it's just going to be filled with new memories and new thoughts. And so if I'm training and I have a good idea, or even now as a mental performance coach, I have a good idea for a video or something I want to do with an athlete and I don't write it down, I'm subject to forgetting it. And so I think journaling or writing is just a good way to get your thoughts onto paper, make it permanent. You don't have to follow a format or a structure, but it's just a way to like get what's going on in your head onto paper so you can kind of clear your thoughts and just kind of get rid of the mumbo jumbo that's going on up there. Uh, I think that's a good way for athletes, in their day to day life to kind of like let go of the day. It's a good way to end your day of like, okay, what did I do today? Like, let me just
Right.
recap my day or recap my feelings. But then on the other end, when it comes to actually performing, I think reflecting is another huge thing that athletes can do. You saw Yamamoto do it, mid game, but you can
Yeah.
also do it after the game. I like to follow the three structures of, what went well, what could I improve, and then how can I improve that? And I stole that from, I think, Brian Kane online, but
Yeah.
he has his
Yes.
athletes, not just reflect on what they did poorly, but actually like, okay, what did I do well in that game? Because I can guarantee whether it's your best start or your worst start, there is something that you did well and something that you can improve on. And so the great athletes are not the ones who have a good game and then just move on to the next game, or they have a bad game and then they say, okay, no, you know what? Like, I hope it's different next time. They say, no, like,
Right.
let me write on paper, what can I do better next time? How can I do it better? Because you actually need the action steps of implementing it. Um, and then figuring out, okay, before my next start, this is what I need to do step by step to improve on it and not let it happen again.
Yeah, I think that reflection piece is so important because again, I think you put it in a very cool way. I've never heard someone kind of explain it like that, where it's like, how many times in school have I been like, oh, I'll remember that, and I didn't write it down, and then I completely forget it. It's the same thing, like you said, about in game, how you're feeling, where you can feel it in the moment and be like, oh, I'll remember how I felt or how this was, X, Y, and Z. And then once you're done, it's like, oh my God, I completely forget exactly how I felt and what was going through my head and the adjustments I made. So I think that is a really cool point to kind of, mirror, is just making sure you are writing those things down and adding that reflection piece, because I think that's important. And I'd love to hear from your perspective too, because I'm sure a lot of people that you have worked with have also, not even just from the side of like, I might forget about this and then I'll just address it tomorrow type of thing. the overanalyzation piece. I'd love to hear from your perspective because I know I was probably an athlete that did this a ton where they might have taken that reflection piece and even though you have those three questions that you just said, they might have made it 20 questions and then they're reevaluating everything that they did where it's like, oh, I might have had something good, but I can make it better. And then it's like, oh, these bad things need to be addressed. So then at the end of the day, you might have a whole laundry list of things that you think you need to do. When in actuality, if you just kind of sum it down to the three questions you had, it simplifies it. I'd love to hear your perspective on like working with those athletes that might be a little bit of overthinkers and might be trying to do too much after a game, if that makes sense. Like trying to change too many things mentally.
Yeah, and that's a good point because a lot of athletes, especially high performers, are very cognitive and they want to, think through every situation, every scenario. Um, One thing that I like to do when I'm telling an athlete to reflect is not do it right away, but do it, maybe 24 hours after the game, because you can allow yourself to kind of step away from the moment and analyze, from an outsider perspective, like what happened in that game. Um, and it's very easy to overthink every little thing. Like, dang it, if I threw that pitch, 1 inch more inside, he wouldn't have hit it,
Right,
or my mechanics were off, or like any little thing that you want to harp on, you can find a way to overthink about it. Um, but at the end of the day, it's almost reminding the athletes that they're just a kid and they're having fun playing the game and they're good enough to play at the level that they are and succeed. So we don't need to like get in our own way and get in our own heads and make it harder than it needs to be, which is super easy to do because if every athlete thought the other way, like we would be out of a job and every athlete would be super good at what they're doing. So
right,
it's kind of like getting them, almost reminding them that, hey, like you're good enough to be where you are. We don't need to over like analyze the process, don't need to think harder than we need to. Like let's get back
right.
to that childlike you just going out there and playing.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that going back to the child like you because again, when you are young and you're just playing because you love the sport and there's nothing else that matters in that moment, right? So I feel like that is when we can ultimately be the most present. But we talked about the preparation piece and how important that is and making sure we have, things put in place to not, I don't want to say ensure success, obviously, but give us our best odds in our head of be going out there and giving us our best shot at the day. Now, when you're in game, and we're talking about in game adjustments, right? Is there anything that you kind of work with athletes on, like whether it's maybe trigger words to try to get people back to center, maybe it's breath work? Like, what things have you tried to implement with athletes when it comes to maybe actual in game adjustments? Like, when it comes to like refocusing, maybe clearing things, whatever kind of works for them and works for you.
Yeah, from a baseball perspective, I think a pre-pitch routine is almost like necessary. I don't want to say
Yes,
like super like it's you can agree it's very necessary.
definitely.
Um,
Yep.
because especially as a pitcher, like you're the one with the ball, you're in control. You want to control the moment and the scenario as much as possible. And if you're on the mound and your mind is wandering and you're thinking about this, that, and the other thing, and your tempo's off pitch to pitch, like all you're doing is just adding more variables to the equation that allows things to go wrong. And so what a pre-pitch routine does is it allows you to control the moment even before the pitch is thrown. And like you mentioned earlier, it includes, I like to say, a physical cue, a mental cue, and a deep breath. And so the physical cue is something that you can touch, where I would touch my hat, or you can touch your belt, or you can take off your glove and like rub the baseball. Something that like you can physically do or touch that kind of you associate with, okay, like I'm in the present moment and I'm right here, right now.
Right.
Next, the mental cue. This can be a phrase or a keyword or just something that reminds you of like, okay, like I'm locked in, I'm ready to go. And it's different for everybody. I'm not going to tell an athlete what they need to say because each
Right.
person will have their own thing, right? Russell Wilson was why not me?
Yeah.
And I really like that. I almost used it sometimes where I'd write that in
Yeah.
my hat and that would be my
Right.
thing. Other times it would be like attack the zone, get ahead early, whatever it is for you in that moment that okay, when I see this, like I'm ready to go for this pitch. And then lastly is the deep breath because
Yeah.
it centers us, it lowers our heart rate, it controls our focus, and it most importantly brings us to the present moment. And if you can do those three things every single pitch, it does not matter whether it was a good pitch or a bad pitch before, because you're so in the present moment that nothing else matters.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's great. I'm a big proponent of a pre-pitch routine. I think that's like you said, you don't want to say the word like mandatory, but I think it just benefits everyone so well. It's so helpful. And again, it's kind of in the same vein that you talked about the visualization piece with, where it kind of gets you back to the same center in each and every pitch, where like the visualization's like, I've done this. Once you complete your pre-pitch routine, it's like, oh, I've done this, whatever it is, 90 times before this. This is my 91st pitch. Everything's the same, right? Nothing changes from here on out. And I kind of like love that ideology of having the same thing kind of repeat over and over to get back to that state of being level and calm. So no, I love that. I think that's awesome. And I do
Yeah.
think every pitcher should implement that.
And I think it applies to every athlete in any sport is a pre-shot routine in golf, hitters doing the same thing before every pitch. Um, I think what separates elite athletes from average or not so good athletes is the confidence in themselves that regardless of what happens, they trust their ability so much that it does not affect how they go about the next routine or the next rep. And I saw a video of Barry Bonds the other day when he was hitting, and I don't know what the pitch was, but you can see him, swing out of his ass, and he
Yeah.
swings and misses, and he adjusts his batting gloves, he gets back in the box, and he does the same exact thing next pitch
Yeah.
and hits the ball like 400 feet to right field.
Right.
And an average athlete might say like, okay, I swung too hard, let me slow myself down, let me change my approach, let me like do something different. Where Barry Bonds is so sure of himself that he says, okay, I failed, so what, I'm going to get the
Right.
next pitch.
Right.
And it goes for
No.
pitching too, where you throw a great pitch and you go, okay, I don't need to do my whole routine again, like I'm ready to go. Or you do your routine and you walk a guy and you go, okay, like the world is on fire, I need to change what I'm doing right now. Where that goes back to preparation, where you're not prepared enough because you don't believe in yourself enough to stick to what you're doing regardless of the outcome.
Right. Now, I'd love to hear your perspective on maybe like because I think you brought up a great point about the athletes being so confident in kind of their process and understanding what they're doing that when it comes time to that, right? Barry Bonds swings out of his shoes, misses one, and then the next one, same exact swing and connects. And it's like, all right, well, clearly he trusted himself to double up and do that again, and it succeeded. Now, I think some people, and I'd say this is more on the physical side of like routine base, where it's a starter and maybe they're on a road game. Like I'm thinking back to high school too, where it's like you're on a road game and now you only have 45 minutes to warm up instead of an hour, and it's like I can't go through my whole routine now. Like I'm screwed. Can you talk about maybe the flexibility a little bit of having you have your core piece of your routine, but maybe being flexible with some of the other things where it's like, I don't need to follow all of these to an exact T because then that becomes like a superstition. But being able to have enough confidence to be like, I can still complete the routine that I want to without having to complete everything exactly the way that I want it to go, like no matter the circumstance.
Yeah, and I think you put that well where you said there's the core of this is what I do to prepare, and
Yeah.
everything else helps it, but it's not
Right.
super necessary.
Right.
Where, like I said, you can visualize yourself, at your home stadium, but when you go to the away field, like it's still 60 feet 6 inches from home plate. Like
Right.
that doesn't
Right.
change. You're still facing a batter. But when it comes to the preparation part, I think it's almost like practicing simplifying what you need to do, saying, how short of a time can I get my mind and my body ready before a game?
Yeah.
Where if that's all I have, like that's all I need. And it could be 20-minute, do some arm circles, a light toss, and spend 2 or 3 minutes like deep breathing and getting your visualization reps in. Or it could be a time where, it's a home game and you have an hour and a half to do all that stuff where
Yeah.
you kind of elongate it, take a little extra time and slow yourself
Right.
down. Um, but finding out like how short of a time can I prepare myself as good as I need to and adjusting from there.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think that's something that I wish when I was playing, I kind of maybe implemented a little bit better because again, like even when the start would begin, the thoughts kind of creep in your head. It's like, oh, you didn't get to go through your whole routine. Like maybe that's why. And it's like that lack of confidence, like you said, shows maybe a little bit of a lack of trust in the process that you put in place, because it's like, oh, if I didn't hit every single check mark in this routine, then I'm not going to be able to go out and perform the way I want. But again, at the end of the day, if you can kind of simplify it and say, what's the shortest amount of time that I can accomplish what I want to accomplish before the game, that kind of opens up the world to, like you said, now if I have an hour and a half or I have 30 minutes, I have an understanding and confidence of I can get what I need to get done and I'm ready to go, right? Like I think that's crucial and super important for any pitcher or athlete.
Yeah, and I was the same way as you when I was a pitcher, where I work backwards from first pitch and say, okay, this is when I start my bullpen. This is when I start my log toss and my warm ups. And like, if
Right.
I'm talking to somebody, but it's this minute, I need to leave you because I need to go start my stretching. Where
Exactly. Yes.
if it didn't go my way, like that was almost a built-in excuse of I didn't prepare myself as well as I could have. When in reality, that was me not feeling super confident in myself because I was like, okay, I have to do this certain routine or else it's just not going to go my way. And I think, that says a lot about me as an athlete versus the elite athletes who have that routine down to a science, but they also are able to adjust and go with the flow because they like have prepared themselves leading up to that day as good as possible. And they just ultimately trust themselves that, okay, if I did get a short bullpen or a short long toss session, like I am still so confident in myself because I've prepared myself as good as I can that it's not going to affect me no matter what.
No, I love that. That was very well said. And I feel like that's important for a lot of athletes to hear, because again, we live in a day and age where there's so many different drills you can implement online, especially as a pitcher, right? Like you could go on Instagram reels for hours and just find things that you want to implement into your warm-up routine or whatever it is, and it could take an hour and a half for you to get through all the things that you think you need to get through. But at the end of the day, if you can identify those core things and drill it down to making sure you're just getting that in and everything else is, just gravy from that point, I feel like that's where you're going to find your most success. So I love the way you put that, because I think that's super important.
And especially from the mental side, I don't need athletes to be spending 45 minutes, only working on the mental game because that just
Right.
adds a lot more time to their process. Where if you do it properly and you've prepared yourself, the days or weeks leading up to your games, it could only take 5 or 10 minutes of just centering
Right.
yourself, like doing your breathing, doing your visualization, like getting your mental plan ready, where you don't need a super long amount of time. You can do it on the bus ride or even
Hmm.
shagging BP before the game. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
like this is my process, this is my routine. Like, let me do it right now. Let me find a way to mentally prepare myself where I don't need a super long amount of time to do it.
Right. And I think you brought up a good point about, you know, making that routine before the game short, because you've put in the time before that day, even mentally, in order to prepare yourself and get ready. Now, I'm trying to phrase it into a question in my head, but I've talked with some athletes who are like, the mental performance side of the game, like I can implement that when the season starts. And in my head, I'm almost like, well, that's like saying I'm going to implement my throwing program when the season starts, or I'm going to implement my weightlifting program when the season starts. Like, you don't want to get your first reps when games are happening, right? Like, what would you say to those athletes, and how would you kind of address that and, make them understand it's like anything else. You kind of want to get the reps in and understand what your process looks like before the season even starts.
Yeah, and I would say to them, like, just like anything, the mind is a muscle where you
Yeah.
need to train it, and it takes repetition after repetition to almost get it down to a muscle memory of like, okay, this is who I am, this is what I do. Where I could tell you one thing, okay, like this is how your routine should be before you pitch, and you go out in a game tomorrow and it works for you, but then you start to go back to who you were and what you normally did for hundreds or thousands of innings. It's almost like you need to practice it so long before it just becomes like who you are and your
Yep.
identity as a person. Um, and, like you said, you don't go on the mound saying, I want to throw 90 if you've never thrown 90 in your
Right.
life. That's just not going to
Right.
happen. So
Right.
you can't say, I'm going to go on the mound and I'm going to feel my best and I'm going to be mentally locked in if you
Right.
never practiced it, right? It takes
Right.
so much time and so much energy to change who we are, like change our thought processes because we've spent our whole lives thinking one way. Okay, if we want to improve it or change it, it's
Hmm.
going to take a lot of reps to forget about what we did and almost like shift in a new direction. And that's just not something that can happen overnight.
No, definitely. I completely agree. And yeah, it's the same thing. Like you said, the mind is a muscle. So if you're going to implement all these physical, things over the course of an off season, you might as well also implement the mental side, right? That's when you should begin that program, begin that process, because ultimately when the lights shine the brightest, you want to perform your best. And if you're saying, "Oh, I'm in the biggest spot of my athletic career, now I'm going to try to implement breath work that I've never implemented before," disaster is going to strike. That's what's going to happen, right? It's like you got to get those reps in. It's like we've talked about this whole podcast, right? It's getting the reps in, preparing the way that you need to, so when that moment does hit, you're ready to go and you feel clear mentally when you get in that.
Absolutely. And that all comes down to the preparation, right? You see the vision, but you also understand, okay, it's going to take a lot of work to get there. Like, let me do what I can do today to get as much, like, to get as good as I can be tomorrow, and then just keep improving on that.
Right. Like you said
Yeah,
before, stacking days, stacking wins. So I do love
absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
Um, I think this is a perfect place now to get us to our Fast Five segment. So, like we said before, I told you beforehand, it's five semi rapid fired questions. I'm just going to kind of shoot them at you. They're based on mental performance in sports. And then you're going to kind of give me your best answer you can for each of the five questions. So, we'll start whenever you're ready.
Let's do it.
Awesome. All right. First question. What part of your identity did sports help you discover?
I want to say my competitiveness and just my desire to be as good as I can be at whatever I'm doing. Where I'm not going to be great at everything. Like, I'm an average golfer right now, but it's
Yeah.
my desire to be a great golfer, which pushes me every day to like get 1% better. Um, and I think people can apply that to whatever they're doing where, okay, I'm not great right now, but I can work towards being better. And what can I do today to just slowly improve and slowly like get 1% better?
Awesome. I love that. Question two. Looking back, what moment felt like the end for you, but ended up being a new beginning?
Yeah, I had a start my senior year where I didn't make it out of the first inning. And on that day, it kind of was the end for me where I was like, okay, this really sucks and who knows what's
Yeah.
going to happen from here. But it opened up my eyes to what I could have done better, how I can improve myself moving forward, but then also how can I take that failure and help other people learn from it before it
Yeah.
happens to them.
Awesome. No,
Yeah.
I love that. That's great. Question three is when everything around you is chaotic, what's the one habit that brings you back to center?
I would say almost just letting go and just being like free and loose with like my feelings and my emotions and just being like fun and energetic and enjoying the people around me because as we get older like there's going to be stuff that happens around us that we can't control, like I don't know, taxes, death, whatever it is. um but in that moment we can choose how we respond to that, and if we don't let it affect us and we continue to be ourselves, then we can get through it and just continue to push forward.
Awesome. Now, number four, what belief about yourself did you have to unlearn in order to grow as an athlete or now as a person?
I would say the belief that people are born a certain way. And for me, it was like my confidence in whatever I was doing because I feel like inherently there were just some things I did where wasn't so sure in myself. And I felt like I could watch other people just go out there and perform. And for me, it was okay, I'm not as good as them. I'm going to go into this with a different mentality. When in reality, just like anything we do, we can train to be who we want to be. And it's almost like an alter ego where we go out there, nobody's telling us who we are in that moment. We can choose how we respond, but also like who we are in that moment. Um, and I think that's something that I can apply to anything, especially even now as I'm not an athlete. I
Yeah,
want to go into this meeting or this phone call like as this person. Who's to say I can't be? And it's not letting who you were in the past like dictate who you're going to be moving forward.
right. No, I love that. That's awesome. And then Last question, number 5. What does success feel like to you now, and how has that changed since you started?
I would say success for me now as a mental performance coach is seeing an athlete go out there and just play freely and just play as themselves. And just, you can almost sense, like, there's no words to describe it. When you see an athlete go out there and they're just, bawling, and you can see, like, okay, he's enjoying the moment. He's super, like, locked in. There's nothing I can say or do to take him out of that moment. That's beautiful to see, and it's so fun to watch because you watch pro sports and those guys are just going out there and doing it, but because they've put in the work and they've prepared themselves for that moment. And so now that I'm no longer an athlete, if I can work with somebody to help get them to that point, regardless of the outcome of what they're doing, that's the ultimate goal for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love to hear that. Justin, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time to share with us your journey and go through kind of a lot of the mental performance side of things that we talked about today. I have no doubts in my mind that you're going to continue to have success with this. And just the way you talk about it, I can see that you're passionate about this. And I love to hear that you're working with athletes and kind of helping them curate and craft their mental performance needs so they can go out and perform the way that they want. I know you have a great social media presence as well. Can you kind of plug your social media? I know you're on Instagram and I'm sure TikTok and everywhere else, but can you kind of plug your social media so the followers can kind of go take a peek at your stuff whenever they get the chance?
Yeah, my TikTok and Instagram are at Hirschberg Performance Lab. You'll just find a lot of clips on, mental performance tips or drills or ways to get better, like 1% every single day. And it's my passion to keep exploring those and finding new ways to teach it. And, if you come across my page, I hope you can learn something from it.
Awesome. No, I love that. So, Justin, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you sharing all this with us. This is really awesome. It was a really insightful episode. So, really appreciative that you came on and were able to share all this.
Of course. Thank you, Brandon. That was very fun to do.
Of course. Awesome. All right. Thank you again, and I'll see you later.